All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Wendy Sullivan from New Zealand Landcare Trust, and I'm the coordinator for Marlborough. Actually, our topic has attracted people from all around the country. So, just to give us an idea of who's out there, and also to check that our chat function is working. Feel free to pop where you are at the moment into the chat, and you'll find the chat down on the bottom bar in the middle there. So if you've got any questions throughout the webinar, pop them in the chat, and we'll definitely have time to answer them at the end of Susan's presentation. And also, if you've got any examples of the work that you're doing that is relevant, feel free to add that. Now, we don't have participant videos on just for privacy because we are recording this webinar, but we'll be able to read what you say in the chat. I'll get started. Today we are joined by Susan Moore-Lavo, Senior Advisor for Te Uru Rakau. And, we often think that we have to choose between land productivity and preservation of our ecological systems, but increasingly more and more landowners are trusting that our native ecosystems, they're not competitive to our farms or our productive lands, but they're actually one of their greatest assets. And I heard Susan give a talk in a woolshed last year, and I was absolutely fascinated, and I thought we've got to get Susan online. So, thank you, Susan. Thank you for joining us, and I'll let you introduce yourself and take it from there.
Thanks, Wendy. I will bring my presentation up, and I might just turn my video off so I'm not looking at myself while I talk. I can look at Wendy instead. Oh, don't even have to look at Wendy.
No, John.
I'll also apologise in advance because I do have a little bit of a cold, unusually. So hopefully that won't affect anything. And Wendy, that's all good to go?
Yes, you're good to go,
yep.
Susan.
Good, okay. So, yes, as Wendy said, kia ora koutou. My name's Susan Moore-Lavo, and I'm a Senior Advisor with Te Uru Rakau, New Zealand Forest Service. And my role is as the Senior Advisor for Forestry Support for Top of the South, Te Uru region, where I'm available to provide information and advice across the sector in relation to all tree types and forest types. But my specific area of knowledge is in native forest establishment. So as well as my regional role, I'm involved in the work that Te Uru Rakau are doing to further establish native forests. Well-managed forests can provide environmental benefits, cultural and spiritual values, and timber and non-timber forest products all on the same site. Most remaining native forest is protected within the conservation estate. However, significant portions exist on private ownership, including on productive farmland and within plantation forestry estates. Of around 6.4 million hectares of native forest, 1.2 million hectares is in private land ownership, and around 188,000 hectares is protected in QE2 covenants. In the Marlborough region, of around 483,000 hectares of native forest, 42% is in private ownership. There are many opportunities to integrate native forest blocks within productive landscapes, which can enhance existing land uses rather than competing with them. And so today my talk is only going to be able to briefly touch on the main topics of ecosystem services and economic opportunities. And no doubt there are new and emerging markets that will present themselves to us in the future. And some of you may already be involved in these or thought of what these may be. I'm hoping this is going to move for me. Yep. So nature is both a risk to productive land use, for example, intense storm events or prolonged droughts. And native forest land can be seen as removing land from production and historically was removed to provide land for farming, urban development, horticulture. But nature can also present an opportunity to reduce risk, reduce costs, and potentially provide secondary sources of income. Native plantings generate a number of ecosystem services, including regulating water flow, helping mitigate fire risk, and provide raw materials for use on farm. Ecosystems and biodiversity represent what is sometimes referred to as natural infrastructure or nature-based solutions. So just like our built infrastructure, like roads, fences, and dams, natural infrastructure can provide solutions that work alongside more traditional infrastructure on farm, enhancing resilience and reducing systemic risk. Insurance companies are beginning to look at how natural infrastructure can reduce the risk and loss, lowering recovery time and reducing future vulnerabilities. Because our land was isolated for millions of years, communities of plants, insects, reptiles, and animals all evolved together in ways that exist nowhere else. Native temperate rainforests once covered around 82% of our land area, and there's now only 24% of that forest cover left. And much of this is restricted to the colder and wetter parts of New Zealand, such as the West Coast, or is dominated by beech forest. Of the native species found in New Zealand, 80% of plants, 90% of insects, and all of our reptiles and terrestrial mammals are endemic, which means they occur where nowhere else on the planet, but right here, and sometimes localized to a single rock face or a cliff face. And New Zealand is a biodiversity hotspot. South Marlborough is a hotspot within that, having a high degree of local endemism. So for these reasons alone, protecting what we have left is enough of a reason for many landowners to protect and restore native ecosystems. But there are also many more pragmatic reasons for doing so, and how in supporting our native biodiversity, we can also support people. Not all native plantings need to be a forest, as even small areas can provide benefits. When it rains, any water that doesn't soak into the ground becomes runoff. This runoff picks up nutrients from fertilizer and chemicals, animal waste, and loose soil sediment as it runs across the land and is carried to the closest stream, river, or lake. When trees and plants grow around waterways, runoff has to pass through their roots and the soil around them. This filters out many contaminants before they enter the water. And once established, planting can stabilize riverbanks and steep slopes and can mitigate floodwater by slowing down the flow as it passes over land. Our native aquatic life benefit from stream temperatures being moderated. Cooler temperatures created by shade prevent the growth of algal blooms, and filtered water limits the growth of undesirable plants that feed off nutrients in the water. Habitat is created by the input of leaves or small amounts of woody debris. Less sediment means our insects can breathe, who in turn feed native fish, who enter the sea and feed our marine fish, and it all begins with the quality of the water way upstream. So headwaters influence the amount of water going downstream, the quality of the water, the movement of organic matter such as leaves and branches, and inorganic matter such as silt, gravel, and clay. Retiring that steeper land in the upper catchments provides the optimal benefits, and these may also be the parts of a property or a catchment that are least productive or even completely inaccessible. Wetlands, whether natural or constructed, can serve some specific purposes in terms of mitigating high water flows and also provide a source of water during droughts. Recent reports have stated that New Zealand has been experiencing a significant weather event once every 8 days. Our region here in the top of the south has had its share with severe storm impacts in Nelson in 2022, Tasman in 2025, and frequent impacts in North Marlborough. And of course, you from other regions around the country here today will have felt those effects more recently than that. We're getting more frequent rain events with more rain falling with greater intensity. In urban environments, forestry and farming landscapes, there is often limited ability to slow down that flow of water. But wetlands can hold water and release it slowly, while also providing an opportunity for native habitat, which can even support endangered wetland species like fern birds, it's this little guy here, bittern and crake. Wetland plants can filter nutrients and microbes such as E. coli and capture sediment. NIWA reports that well-designed wetlands are capable of reducing the load of nitrates and contaminants from anywhere from 25 to 50%, depending on their size, which is why wetlands are sometimes referred to as nature's kidneys, as they can remove nutrients and phosphorus through a combination of physical, chemical, and biological processes. And native plants can be used to create fire breaks by focusing on fleshy natives with a high water content. Low flammability species are those that are moist, have supple leaves with little dry material, for instance, Grisselina or Pseudopanax. This contrasts with highly flammable species, which have fine leaves, dead material contained within the plants, dry twigs or leaves, terpenes or oils, and are resinous. China has planted over 500,000 hectares of green firebreaks and found that these are most effective and more effective than traditional firebreaks when constructed of a layered forest structure, have a closed canopy, and were planted perpendicular to the predominant wind direction. They are also most effective when used in conjunction with natural breaks such as waterways, with a width of at least 10 to 12 metres or up to 60 metres on steep slopes where fire travels more quickly. So this makes our damp gullies good options as fire breaks, which is where natives begin to regenerate of their own accord when we leave them to do so. Your animals will thank you for some protection from the extremes of hot and cold, wet and windy weather. Stock benefit by using less energy to keep either warm or cool. Trees can improve the survival rate of young lambs and calves and reduce the stress on vulnerable animals. In hot, dry climates, light shade can improve pasture growth through reducing moisture loss. And if placed in sufficient numbers, spaced planted trees of any kind can also be potentially eligible for the emissions trading scheme. Note that the recent restrictions on planting trees on LUC Class 1 to 6 land don't apply to native trees. So if a tree such as a kānuka or tōtara is used, less than 250 trees per hectare are needed to meet forest land definitions. And research organisations like Vedantia are doing quite a lot of work in this space if you want to see more on that. By retiring marginal land, farmers can focus resources on more productive land. Quantifying this can be difficult, but a recent case study in Northland through the Kaipara-Moana Remediation Project on the economic impact on retiring marginal land showed that grazing efficiency increased by achieving operational efficiencies from improved stock flow and time savings, improved animal welfare, and reduced stress for both the farmer and the stock. From a financial standpoint, they found that retiring around a third of the steeper country resulted in a revenue uplift of $14,000 on a farm with an estimated payback period of 4.5 years. So this doesn't include a calculation of what might be gained through ETS credits for reverting farmland, or the reduced expenditure relating to scrub clearance and cost of flood and slip events from bare land. While native forests take a while to establish, over time the root systems that occur in the diverse communities within a forest of mixed-age trees provide resilience. So where land offers the right conditions, natural reversion is a cost-effective means to establish native forests. This can result in larger scale establishment, which can offer greater and multiple benefits. And even small plantings of natives can aid production through creating habitat for beneficial insects. Native plants provide all year round food supply for native insects, which have been demonstrated to be more effective than exotic species such as honeybees. These native beneficial insects act as both pollinators and as predators. Plant and food have demonstrated that there are multiple interactions, as you can see here, between native species and native plants that create complex networks to increase resilience in relation to climate, loss of species, and to ensure more efficient species are present. Leader Brand grow vegetables for supermarkets across their region. But prior to their native planting project, there was a predominance of conifer hedgerows, which were found to be habitat for approximately 3 insect species, none of which were either pollinators or predators. So beginning with 1/4 hectare, they've now expanded this to 4 hectares of native planting with the intention of extending this to marginally productive areas, corners and fence lines across the farm. It's also hoped that this initiative will be taken up across the area, which is in the Canterbury Plains there, where there's limited native forest existing. This has enabled Leaderbrand to reduce the use of pesticides as part of their integrated pest management approach, with pesticides now being a last resort, reducing all the time as the planted areas establish. And as that young forest grows, the people working there are increasingly appreciating this as a place to enjoy, and they've incorporated things like memorial plantings and cultural elements within their planting blocks. Now, native tall tree species once provided a resource for a range of products, whether edible, medicinal, or for construction. So milling of native forests is controlled by regulation, but it is possible to plant trees with the intention of future harvesting and creating a sustainable resource of high quality specialty timbers for future generations. I'm sure we've all seen beautiful flooring or furniture made from species such as beech or matai, but there are a whole range of known uses and undoubtedly many yet to be explored. Kowhai, for instance, is a dense, elastic, and durable wood, one of our strongest native hardwoods. Its wood was used for tools, machinery, fences, and cabinet work. However, it is toxic, so it's not used for tableware. Totara has a wide range of applications, and in Northland, a regional industry is being explored with Te Uru Rakau supporting Tane's Tree Trust and Te Tai Tokoro Māori Trust in this initiative. A lot of this work is focused on how a regional supply chain network might work. And once a woodlot of native trees is established, continuous cover forestry practices will maintain the multiple benefits of the forest. So the timbers that you can see here from the top is a flooring made from meadow, silver beech, which I believe that's the Supreme Court in Wellington, tanikaha beam, totara uses a house cladding, kaikatea and boxes, which is they were once used a lot for butter boxes, as you probably know, and a red beech flooring. And it's not only timber that can provide a future income source, but also non-timber forest products to consider. Some are well known to us, such as manuka or forest honey, oils, skincare and medicinal products, or gin distilled with kawakam, manuka and horapito. New Zealand, with its rich and unique biodiversity, is home to a variety of native edible plants that are rich in bioactive compounds. These compounds exhibit a wide spectrum of bioactivities, such as anti-inflammatory, immune stimulatory, anti-cancer, antioxidant, antimicrobial effects. This is a largely unexplored resource with immense potential for the creation of functional foods and nutraceuticals. Matauranga is embedded in these resources and their use, with Māori at the forefront of leading these innovations. The Endeavour Fund has recently provided funding for research into indigenous yeasts, which utilise unique organisms for flavouring and fermentation of non-alcoholic beverages for domestic and global markets. Biotenex is another example, focusing on harakeke fibre for aerospace and automotive uses, apparel and geotextiles. And any of the uses outlined here can potentially be underpinned by returns through the emissions trading scheme and hopefully in the not too distant future, biodiversity credits. So the emissions trading scheme recognises both planted and naturally reverted native plantings, provided some key elements are present. So they're essentially, as shown here in the diagram, the at least 1 hectares trees that ultimately have to achieve 5 metres tall and have a canopy cover at maturity of 30% of that 1 hectare area. Credits, of course, can only be accrued for trees established after 1990, but as a permanent forest, these can be gained for at least 50 years. So they're not as financially competitive as a planting of exotic trees due to their rate of growth. 20 hectares of native trees will have accumulated at today's value of $50 per carbon unit, around $323,000 worth of carbon units by the end of that 50-year period, noting that it only becomes monetized at the point of sale and that value obviously fluctuates. So in terms of biodiversity credit, there's currently a pilot underway with the government testing how this will be monitored to ensure real value is being measured and rewarded over time, as well as what will the government's role be in a biodiversity system, and does it relate to the emissions trading scheme or not? Biodiversity credits are more likely to support the protection of our existing forests that fall outside of the ETS. And all of these opportunities help to ensure New Zealand products can build and maintain an economic advantage, regardless of the products we are exporting. Despite recent changes to the global trading environment, 70% of our primary export value continues to be directed to economies with mandatory climate-related financial disclosures. There is an increasing consumer demand as well as regulation for environmentally sustainable products. The economic benefit of protecting, establishing, and enhancing native forests can sit alongside their environmental and intrinsic values. Imagine how our forest systems, our lands, and our people might benefit if we understood our role as an integral part of those ecosystems. They're not a distant forest on a mountain that many may never visit, or an annoying piece of scrubland that we keep needing to stay on top of and control. But they are around us in our everyday lives so that we understand and value how they work, notice where they are in stress or are visited by new threats, and how we can ensure they thrive and understand how their survival is critical to our own. And this piece of forest here is actually one of the pieces of forest that's protected on my land. So our forestry support team, who are nationwide, are available to provide advice and connection to landowners on a range of topics, including how to establish forests, methods of establishment, regulation that applies to forests and land use, such as the ETS and the National Environmental Standards around commercial forestry. And we work across sectors and agencies to connect people with information and resources. That's the end of my talk, and any one of those topics probably could be an entire discussion in itself, but I am interested in any questions that I can answer or get back to you on, but also to hear from what experiences and insights that you can derive on native planting in your land or catchment.
Oh, thank you, Susan. That was fascinating. As you were talking, I was making some notes. So, now, if you planted a stream, for example, and it was 5 or 10 meters wide, you can get ecosystem services such as erosion control of the stream bank. You can get sediment filter from the surrounding runoff. It's cooling down the water, so it's improving freshwater biodiversity. It's providing an ecological corridor and habitat for terrestrial biodiversity. If you took at least one product off that forest, such as honey or wood, and then if it was long enough, you could claim ETS off it, that's at least 6 purposes, that one stream. It's quite incredible, isn't it? That we just think that sometimes it's just a nice to do, but actually it's a hugely functional piece of land.
There, there are whole areas on a piece of land where you can think about connecting like a stream to a critical source area to a piece of, marginal hill country that's reverted into forest to create whole corridors within a land block. Whether or not you're interested in credits as well, that's a whole other consideration. But those things can actually link up together quite well.
Yeah. So feel free to put some questions or comments in the chat there. We've got one from Paula already, but yeah, everyone else just take the time to add yours in. So Paula's saying, I know it's a bit difficult as she understands how complex wetland systems are, but is there any scientific research that quantifies how much wetlands can retain during heavy rainfall event? Do you know of any studies that have done that?
Well, I can't answer that question right here, but I suspect that there's quite a bit that NIWA have done because they have a whole research area around wetland construction. And I expect from what my understanding is, and probably your work, Wendy, it's all going to be dependent on catchment size and wetland size. And I think it is relative to what the catchment area is as to how as a proportion. How about if I write that question down and I can find some information on that?
Yeah, it's good to quantify, isn't it? If you can, but as you say, there's so many variables. In your introduction, you talked about insurance. I was quite intrigued. Do you have any examples where insurance premiums or what kind of natural assets are looked favourably on by insurance companies?
So I was at a talk by the rural insurers a little while ago, and there was also a presentation that some of you may have been to in the last week, where with Pure Advantage, I think it was. No, Te Uru Circle. And they were talking about reducing premium. They were saying that there's studies that show for $1 spent on resilience on a property is $13 saved for future like remediation costs. So they are looking at reducing some of the insurance companies, rural insurers, are looking at reducing costs of premiums based on what some of those infrastructure on farm is, such as I imagine wetlands, things that are going to stop flooding in the future. It's probably something to talk to an individual insurance company about how they may recognise it, because it's no doubt different between insurers. But if you want to go back and check on the Aotearoa Circle's latest webinar, there is a discussion in there around insurances and nature-based solutions.
Yeah, anything we can do to bring those premiums down or would be useful. There's no more questions in the chat, so I think you've been let off the hook pretty easily then. Yeah, people need to get back to work, so that's probably quite a good time to end. Yeah, thank you so much, Susan, for coming and preparing your presentation. Yeah, as I say, it always astounds me. We often forget exactly what benefits native habitat can provide us outside just the usual. It should be protected for its own intrinsic sake, which is the most important. But yeah, it's about making use of native habitats and making it work for on farm or on vineyard or wherever we are. So yeah, no more questions. So on that note, I shall farewell everyone. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, participants, for spending your lunch with us, and we'll end the webinar now.